Hello, my true crime lovelies. How are you? I hope you are as lovely in life as you are in my mind. Oh my goodness. So, Arizona's leading lady, Treena K, sticks the landing. She has written this awesome sentencing memorandum that I'm going to read to you. She's asking for everything, and the victims will be able to testify. So Lori's little, I waive everything, I agree to everything as far as the aggravating factors. Justice delayed is not justice denied. But before I get into it, let's thank the members. I'm going to run the intro and I'll see you on the other side. Alrighty. Hopefully that wasn't too loud. I did give you a warning. Let's look at this, shall we? So, state sentencing memorandum. Let's dig into it. First, we're going to go over the facts. On January 30th, 2019, Charles Vallow, Lori Vallow's husband at the time, called the Gilbert Police Department to report that the defendant believed he was Ed Schneider, that she said she was going to murder Ed Schneider and that she was going to destroy him. This was the beginning of Charles Vallow's nightmare from which he was never able to wake. January 31st, 2019, Charles repeated his concerns to the Gilbert Police Department about the defendant's beliefs. Charles Vallow is recorded on body-worn camera video telling the police that the defendant threatened to murder him, that the defendant said that Charles was dark and she was calling him by someone else's name. Charles Vallow told the police that his wife believed she was a translated being and that she couldn't die. Charles explained to the Gilbert Police Department that he was concerned for his children and that he did not know what she might do to them. Charles told the police that the defendant told him to come get the kids and that she did not care what happened to them. I want to know if they are going to be able to show, my other monitor just went out, video from. We watched that on my channel. I think it's the video is called Charles Vallow was a Good Man, but I wonder if it'll be entered into evidence. Okay. So Charles Vallow had sole custody of his son, J.J. Vallow, from the time this defendant disappeared in February of 2019 until April of 2019, when the defendant came back into Charles's life. Charles invited the defendant and Tylee Ryan to live with JJ and him in Texas. When the defendant wanted to move back to Arizona, Charles rented a house in Chandler, Arizona for the defendant. Charles moved the defendant, JJ, and Tylee into South Four Peaks at the end of June of 2019. Charles remained living in Texas. On July 9th, 2019, Charles Vallow booked Adam Cox a flight to Arizona to help him with an intervention to get Lori Vallow back into the traditional LDS Latter-day Saints beliefs. A few minutes after Charles booked his flight, Adam Cox called his brother, Alex Cox, and let him know he would be in town on the 10th and wanted to stay with him. The evening of July 9th, 2019, Lori Vallow told her brother Alex Cox, "It's all coming to a head this week. I will be like Nephi, I am told, and so will you." After this text, the defendant and Alex Cox spoke on the phone for 56 minutes. The evening of July 10th, Alex Cox drove to the defendant's home with a gun and spent the night at the defendant's house. On July 11th, Lori Vallow's threats to kill Charles Vallow came true. Charles Vallow came to the house he rented for Lori Vallow to pick up his son JJ and take him to school. As Charles arrived, he saw Alex Cox's truck, and he knew that Lori Vallow and her brother were planning something. Gotta be trying something. This defendant allowed Charles to put JJ into the rental car, and then she took Charles' cell phone and refused to return it. Lori Vallow was able to keep Charles inside the house by refusing to give back his cell phone. No matter how many times Charles demanded the defendant hand over his cell phone, this defendant would not give it to him and instead walked around the house with his phone. As this defendant was holding on to Charles Vallow's cell phone, Alex Cox came out with his gun. Alex Cox shot Charles once in the chest, causing Charles to fall to the floor. As Charles lay on the floor, Alex Cox shot him a second time in the abdomen. Lori Vallow left the scene in Charles Vallow's rental car while Alex Cox stayed at the house and staged the scene. This defendant and Alex Cox waited approximately 47 minutes before calling 911. Later, the defendant and her brother went through Charles Vallow's cell phone before giving it to the police. No. The day after Lori Vallow and Alex Cox killed Charles Vallow, Lori Vallow texted Charles Vallow's sons from his prior marriage and told them, "Hi, boys. I have very sad news. Your dad passed away yesterday." And if you look at this, this is sent at 2:36 p.m. She didn't even call in the morning. Your dad passed away yesterday. I'm working on making arrangements and I'll keep you informed with what's going on. I'm still not sure how to handle things. Just want you to know that I love you. And so did your dad. Double exclamation point. No. The defendant's text message to Charles Vallow's sons was not only distressing to them, but it was also devastating. Although the defendant said she would keep them informed on what was going on, when Charles's son asked what happened, the defendant responded, "We are still waiting for the ME report. I'll let you know more when I can." Charles Vallow's sons repeatedly texted this defendant asking her what happened to their father and for information about the funeral. This defendant would not tell Charles's sons what happened or provide any real information. When she did respond, the defendant acted like she did not know how Charles died. Eventually, one of Charles's sons reached out to their aunt Kay Woodcock about the text message from Lori Vallow saying their dad was dead. Kay Woodcock also had no idea that her brother Charles Vallow was dead. So Lori didn't even have the decency to call the sister. The sister would have known right away Lori was up to something, though. She would have suspected Lori. Kay and her husband Larry were able to verify that Charles was shot and killed by Alex Cox after they Googled his name. Kay Woodcock then had to tell her brother's sons that their dad had been shot and killed by their uncle Alex. On July 15th, 2019, the defendant called Banner Life Insurance Company claiming to be the beneficiary of Charles Vallow's $1 million life insurance policy. On July 18th, the defendant learned that Charles Vallow had changed the beneficiary to his life insurance policy. On July 18th, this defendant messaged her soon-to-be husband, Chad Daybell, and said, "So I talked to the insurance company. He changed it in March. So it was probably Ned before we got rid of him." Lori Vallow moved to Rexburg, Idaho in August of 2019 to be closer to Chad Daybell. Lori Vallow could have allowed JJ Vallow to go live with Kay Woodcock, but instead she brought JJ and Tylee with her to Idaho. Alex Cox also moved to Rexburg, Idaho in August of 2019. Tylee Ryan was last seen alive on September 8th, 2019 in a photograph from Yellowstone National Park. JJ Vallow was last seen alive on September 23rd, 2019 in a video outside the defendant's apartment. The same day that JJ was last seen, Alex Cox began searching for places to practice shooting near Rexburg and for places to tint the windows of Lori Vallow Daybell's Jeep Wrangler. On September 25th, 2019, this defendant allowed Alex Cox to take her Jeep Wrangler to Dan's window tinting. Shout out to Dan, the 21st century Sean Cassidy, in Rexburg, Idaho, and spent $200 to tint the window so no one could see into the rear of the Jeep. Later that day, Lori Vallow and Alex Cox went to the Walmart store in Idaho Falls, Idaho, and purchased a track phone for Alex Cox to use for the next murder. Alex Cox activated the Idaho Falls Walmart track phone on September 26, 2019. On that same day, Brandon Boudreaux took custody of his children so his soon-to-be ex-wife, Melanie Boudreaux Pulowski, could fly to Rexburg, Idaho. Melanie was the only person who knew Brandon's new address and was in contact with this defendant and Alex Cox. Melanie returned to Arizona on Sunday, September 29th, 2019. On September 30th, this defendant Googled how to get the back seat out of my Jeep Wrangler and watched a YouTube video on how to remove the rear seat of a Jeep Wrangler. This defendant also took custody of Alex Cox's Verizon cell phone that was subscribed to him and began acting as his alibi so Alex Cox could drive to Gilbert, Arizona to shoot and kill Brandon Boudreaux. Alex Cox left for Rexburg, Idaho on the evening of September 30th with the Idaho Falls Walmart track phone. This defendant's Jeep Wrangler was seen on a DEA license plate reader in Arizona on October 1st. The rear tire had been removed from the Jeep. On October 1st, Alex Cox used his Gmail account to search for an address in Mesa, Arizona, and to search for directions to Brandon Boudreaux's rental house. While Alex Cox was preparing to commit the murder of Brandon Boudreaux in Gilbert, Arizona, this defendant rented a storage unit in Rexburg, Idaho, to store the rear seat and tire from her Jeep Wrangler. Video from the storage unit shows Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell putting the tire and rear seat into the storage unit on October 2nd, 2019. On the morning of October 2nd, this defendant attempted to provide a fabricated alibi for Alex Cox. This defendant used Alex Cox's Verizon cell phone to call her cell phone. Both phones were using the same cell tower in Rexburg, Idaho. This call was at 8:02 Arizona time and lasted approximately 24 minutes. Meanwhile, the Idaho Falls Walmart track phone was utilizing cell towers around Melanie Boudreaux Pulowski's rental house in Gilbert, Arizona, before utilizing cell towers in the area of Brandon Boudreaux's rental property. On the morning of October 2nd, the Idaho Falls Walmart track phone and Lori Vallow's Jeep were outside Brandon's house for more than an hour, waiting for Brandon to return home. So remember, he dropped off the kids back to Melanie. So Melanie kind of was able to control his timing. However, they didn't know he was going to the gym. So that's why Alex was there for an hour, because he went to work out. Brandon went to work out. Brandon Boudreaux returned to his rental house at approximately 9:13 a.m. on October 2nd. Brandon immediately saw a Jeep Wrangler with no rear tire and a Texas license plate parked next to his driveway. As Brandon was slowing down, he saw the rear window lift up, a rifle barrel appear, and then he heard a bang and his window shattered. This defendant's co-conspirator, Alex Cox, missed killing Brandon Boudreaux by a couple of inches. Brandon Boudreaux drove off and eventually returned to his rental property. Alex Cox drove off and took back roads to return to Rexburg, Idaho. On October 3rd, Lori Vallow and Alex Cox went to this defendant's, Lori's, storage unit and removed the tire and rear seat for the defendant's Jeep Wrangler and put them back on the defendant's Jeep. Tammy Daybell was killed just a little over 2 weeks later on October 19th, 2019. Now, Treena doesn't put it in here, but remember, Alex allegedly took a shot at Tammy. She thought it was a paintball situation, but then later she would die in her home. So he's 0 for 2 in his shooting. So much for that target practice he did in Rexburg. Chad Daybell was the beneficiary of Tammy's life insurance policy. Tammy's death was later ruled a homicide. So she was later exhumed, I think the day of or the day before Alex Cox died. On November 5th, 2019, this defendant married Chad Daybell in Kauai, Hawaii. On February 20th, this defendant was arrested in Kauai and brought back to Idaho. Sorry if I'm saying it wrong, guys. Tylee and JJ's remains were discovered on June 9th, 2020, on Chad Daybell's property. And that was after an email. I believe, no, it was prior. He sent an email to Tammy saying he had to put something in the pet cemetery. And in reading that email, that's when Leo was like, let's dig up the yard. Tylee Ryan's remains had been dismembered and burned. JJ Vallow's body was duct taped and buried in plastic bags. On May 12th, 2023, Lori Vallow Daybell was found guilty of multiple counts, to include the murder of Tylee Ryan, JJ Vallow, and Tammy Daybell in the District Court of the 7th Judicial District of the state of Idaho in and for the county of Fremont. On July 31st, Lori Vallow Daybell was sentenced to multiple counts of life with the possibility of parole. I was reading on X today, she actually had 5 counts of life. Can somebody help me with that? So 1 for JJ, 1 for Tylee, and then there were 3 for the conspiracy of JJ, Tylee, and Tammy. On April 22nd, 2025, Lori Vallow Daybell was found guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of Charles Vallow in Maricopa County. You and I were here together. On June 12th, 2025. She was found guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of Brandon Boudreaux in Maricopa County. Yeah. A hug? Oh, you need help. Okay. Oh, and a hug. Okay. So here we're just going to go through the aggravating factors. Again, Lori stipulated to these, so there was no trial for this part. The burden was on the state to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, but she, I believe, did not want to hear from the victims, and so she waived it, but she's going to get to hear from the victims on Friday, the 25th, at her sentencing. So the court may consider the statutory aggravating factor that this was a dangerous offense since it involved the use of a... The dogs are going crazy. Please hold. They're still doing fireworks. I don't know why. Back on the dogs. Okay. So, dangerous offense since it involved the use of a deadly weapon. The defendant knowingly, intelligently, and voluntarily waived her right to a jury trial on this aggravating factor and admitted that it existed. The second one, defendant committed this offense as a consideration in the expectation of the receipt of anything of pecuniary value, $1 million. In this case, defendant conspired with Alex Cox to kill Charles Vallow on July 11, 2019. This defendant called Banner Life on July 15th. She believed she was a beneficiary to Charles Vallow's $1 million life insurance policy. On July 18th, this defendant learned she was not. The defendant texted Chad Daybell and said, "It's a spear through my heart." This defendant then texted Chad Daybell that she would still get $4,000 a month from Social Security because of murdering Charles. When the defendant later learned that Charles Vallow made his sister, Kay Woodcock, the beneficiary, the defendant confronted her about the money. It is clear from the defendant's actions and words that one of the motives for killing Charles Vallow was pecuniary. And then we've got this offense involved the presence of an accomplice, Alex Cox. Charles Vallow's family suffered emotional and financial harm as a result of this defendant and the crime she committed. Court will hear from the victims. Let me read the whole sentence. Nonetheless, to give the appropriate weight to this aggravating factor, the court will hear from the victims at the time of sentencing about the long journey they have endured to finally get justice for the death of Charles Vallow. Remember, he was the first one, so it's been a long time coming. So, another aggravating factor, defendant was previously convicted of a felony within the 10 years immediately preceding the date of this offense. So even though their murders were after Charles, she was convicted for that first. So that's obviously within 10 years because it was, 23, I think. Yeah, I think. So, and then it just details what those priors were. So the murders and then also the theft of Social Security money that she continued to collect after she unalived the children. Another aggravating factor, this was a dangerous offense since it involved the use of a deadly weapon. She stipulated to that. This offense involved the presence of an accomplice, Alexander Cox. She admitted to that. And Brandon Boudreaux suffered emotional and financial harm as a result of this defendant and the crime she committed. Brandon testified at trial about the fear he experienced the day the shooting occurred. The court heard some bits and pieces of the ongoing trauma that Brandon experienced when he realized that Tammy Daybell had also died, I think she means, under unusual circumstances, and that he was in fear for his life and the life of his children. Brandon Boudreaux knew that this defendant and her brother were responsible for the death of Charles Vallow and possibly Tammy Daybell. He was so afraid that Alex Cox and Melanie Boudreaux Pulowski would return to finish the job that he took his children and went into hiding. While in hiding, Alex Cox and Melanie Boudreau showed up at a friend's residence and at his parents' residence looking for him and their children. Brandon continued to be afraid for his life until this defendant and her husband were taken into custody. This defendant caused Brandon Boudreau to suffer emotional harm, not just from the day of the shooting, but for months after. Defendant was previously convicted of a felony within the 10 years immediately preceding this. She was found guilty. I'm not sure what the difference is. She's citing a different, this is under Arizona 13701, but we'll go with it. So, recommendation. The sentence for conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, a Class 1 dangerous felony, is life, with the possibility of release after 25 years. This court may run the sentences for, and then it lists the case for Charles and then the case for Brandon, concurrently or consecutively to each other. The court can also run the sentences for both of these concurrently or consecutively to the defendant's convictions in the District Court of the 7th Judicial District of the state of Idaho, in and for the county of Fremont. Say that 3 times fast. In case number, so the case where she was convicted of J.J. Tiley and Tammy's murder. Both conspiracy to commit first-degree murder cases have multiple statutory aggravating factors. Each case has its own victims, and each case has caused and continues to cause irreparable emotional harm to the victims and their families. The state respectfully requests that this court run CR 2022 consecutively to CR 2021 and run both of the Arizona cases consecutively to the sentences in the District Court of the 7th Judicial District of the state of Idaho, in and for the county of Fremont, in case number CR 22 21 16 24. Translation: put her under the prison. Right? So they're just going to stack them. That's the recommendation. Give her 2 life sentences to run 25 with the possibility of release after 25, but after she served her 5 life sentences in Idaho. So she'll never see the light of day. And if for some odd reason her appeal is successful and it's overturned, do I think that will happen? No, but I'm just saying hypothetically, for the sake of the argument, she would still have to come to Arizona and do 2 consecutive life sentences. So at a minimum, she would have 50 years if they're running consecutive, right? Just for, I don't know, if she was cleared of everything in Idaho and got the minimum of the 25 to life. Where did it go? Of life with the possibility after 25. So she'd have to do that first 25, and then let's just say they were like, okay, we release you for the murder of Charles Vallow. Then she'd have to start her 25 for the attempted murder of Brandon Boudreau. So I love it. I love it. Miss Treena is precise with the words, with the feelings, with all the things. And so let me know what you guys think. Also, let me know if you've heard that before. So I saw it on Justin Lum. Oh, you guys told me and I can't remember now. Rhymes with something that I'm not remembering. Anyway, on his X feed, that this would make 7 life sentences, which means the other ones would be 5 from Idaho. So I didn't realize that. Let me know if you knew that already, or if that sounds sus to you. Let me know that too. All right, I'll talk to you in the comments. You ready to say it?
Yeah.
Toodles. We'll see you later.